Welcome to an episode of Community Off the Cuff. I'm Nick Rankin. Today we're sitting down with Deanna Delaney, who's maybe my favorite person that I've met while working for the Norwich Police Department, at least from an outside agency. She runs our recovery coach program. Stick around. It'll be interesting.
2-8-36.
I'm really happy that you're in here.
I'm really nervous and wanting to throw up that I'm in here, but it's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm still really nervous to be in here too, but we're going to get through it. And we were just talking prior to Ryan hitting record, or maybe he was recording, about our twitches during public speaking.
Yes,
And
muscle spasms.
muscle spasms.
Yes.
Specifically like a sideways bobblehead for you.
Correct. My neck gets stuck, freeze up, do like a little pharaoh Egyptian
Walk like
thing.
an Egyptian.
Yeah, it's not cute. Not cute.
No, for me, it's the stomach. My stomach tightens up into a big knot, and I get really, really hot and maybe sweaty, but I don't know. People insist they can't see the sweat, but I think they're just being forgiving.
You're not
and
even
being
kind
nice.
of shiny at all right now. You don't look like you're
That's
sweaty.
good, but if you look at my hand, I'm like,
Yeah,
right?
me too. Yeah.
I don't mind going.
We're terrified.
I'll deal with violence on the street, but I will not talk on in front of a microphone.
Isn't that weird? That's really weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. And you said you took up acting to get rid of that.
Yes.
Can we see you in plays? Are they recorded somewhere?
Yeah, they are actually. So I went to the Granite Theater because it's not super close where I would know people. It's kind of far enough away where I didn't think I would run into anybody that I knew. But yeah, I started doing that because I was so afraid of going to different agencies and representing this recovery coach program. I would go and I would have notes, and I would know exactly what I was supposed to talk about, and I would feel confident in my program and the whole model of recovery coaching and peer-based stuff, and just having to stand in front of people and talk about it. I was getting like the stiff neck thing and being physically ill over it, and I was like, I gotta fix this. So that's probably the first step I took to make some kind of a change for the better that was really uncomfortable, and I consciously did it anyway. I was like, I'm gonna go audition for plays, not to be in them, but just to audition and get up on a stage in front of a bunch of people who I don't know.
Right. And are there to judge you?
Yeah, well, the thing about community theater, like, everybody's really laid back, and I knew that going into it. Like, they were, and I knew that if I got up there and I felt really uncomfortable and embarrassed myself, I would never have to see them again, ever. And actually, one of the auditions I went to, I left and I cried all the way home from Westerly because I was so mortified and embarrassed. And I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't bad necessarily. Just getting up in front of people, I felt so embarrassed. I just cried all the way home. But like I was telling you, it's helped so much with me being able to talk in front of people. But since COVID, this whole last year, there's been no theater, no auditions, no opportunities to be in front of people. So I've just kind of like crawled back into that shell, and now I'm terrified to be here. And it didn't help that, you know, we had it set up to do it one day, and then something came up for you, and then something came up for me. So I've been wanting to throw up for about a month now.
Yeah, we've been
Waiting.
planning this for a long time.
Yeah, too long.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw up, yeah.
So you think going and doing it in front of absolute strangers is preferable?
That in person.
Knowing that you won't have to see them again?
Yes. Yeah, because it was the mindset of I won't ever have to see them again, ever. You know, if worst case scenario, I'll just leave and never ever come back.
What'd you audition with? Was it like a monologue, or was it from the play that you were auditioning for technically?
It was like a passage from the show that they were auditioning for. So I think I auditioned maybe twice, and then I think on the second one I was offered a role. And that experience, so like getting offered a role, first of all, is you know, it's an honor, obviously, because other people auditioned for it. So it made me feel really good about myself. But I also, in the back of my head, like low self-esteem stuff, I'm like, they're just doing this because they feel sorry for me. They know that I'm I have stage fright and they just want to like help me. I don't know. I felt like it was like a sympathy give, you know?
Like imposter syndrome, like you're sitting around just
something.
destroying yourself when others refuse to.
Something like that. Yeah. And then the other thing was the audition process. You know, you fill out like an application and you write things like your weight, which I wasn't comfortable with that and I lied. And you write your height and then other things you've been involved with, other shows you've done. And I had no experience. So, you know, and other people in there, they're coming in with like headshots and these beautiful like glamour shots, and I didn't have that.
Right.
So I just, you know, I felt really like less than. But getting involved with that theater was like one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I'm able to put myself in a zone when I'm on stage where I literally feel like I'm by myself. And it's so cool, and I wish I could do it right now.
Do the lights help with that? Because I did a little bit of theater acting like in high school and stuff, and same thing. I've always been a super nervous public speaker, but I found if it was someone else's words, ideas, someone else's play, it's like, oh, I can go up here and I can deliver this.
Yeah.
Like, and really you're playing make-believe, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to pretend to think and feel what that person feels. And like I really enjoyed it, but I felt like the big giant spotlights from the stage made it so I couldn't see the audience. I couldn't see any reactions anyone was giving, and to me it was like, oh, well, I'm not even talking to anybody. I'm by myself up here. And
Right.
It was like
just
way more
with the
comfortable.
people that you're acting with. Yeah, that definitely helps. And yeah, and I feel like a lot of the shows that I have been in now, they're shows that there's a lot of audience reaction, whether it's like laughter or making whatever it is.
Oh yeah, what was the first one you did? Was it like a drama, comedy, musical?
Let me think. The first one I did was The Curious Savage. So it's like a comedy drama, I think is what they would. Dramedy, kind of, yeah. So, and it was really fun. And I got to play the role of a very stuck up, just like wealthy, better than everybody daughter. That was my role. And I got to wear high heels and fancy suits, and I didn't have a ton of lines in that one, and I really, it was fun, and that did help. It helped because that's not who I am at all. Like that character that I played was really, really different from the person that I am in my own life. So it felt like dress up, it felt like I was playing a role, which I was. So that was, I don't know, it's fun. And then it's almost like, it doesn't matter what people think because it isn't really me, it's this character, and it was a bitchy character. It was a character that people didn't really like, and I was okay with that because that's not who I am. So that was pretty cool.
So two things about that. One, and I just learned this, but you're going to appreciate this of all the people that I know. Combining the words drama and comedy when you make a new word out of two old words, that's called a portmanteau. There's a word for when you do that, and I didn't know that until recently, and I learned it on TikTok, of all places, but a portmanteau.
Is that a real word, or is it a
Yeah,
TikTok?
portmanteau is a real word, and it just means, hey, you're combining these two pre-existing words to create a new word.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But the other thing is, you said that, like, oh, well, I didn't really care that they didn't like her because that's not me, and it gives you some boost of confidence. I read this book called The Alter Ego Effect, and this guy basically coaches a bunch of different people, athletes, business people, whatever it is, and he helps them develop their own alter ego that's like contrary to their own weaknesses.
Yep.
And he encourages people to take like a totem with them or put them on, whether it's, like he gives a few examples like a pair of special socks or like a necklace that you can tuck down in your shirt or whatever. And it's like, I only take this thing out when I'm going to be alter ego, whatever. And like famously Bo Jackson used that prior to this guy writing the book. But a lot of professional athletes say that. They're like, no. When I step on the field, I'm
Somebody
this
else.
person.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives them the permission to get rid of performance anxiety, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because like lately in my life with certain things, like I'm not a runner, I'm not an exerciser, but I want to be. So like the other day, after spending a bunch of unjustifiable amount of money on like jogging clothing and shoes, I was like, I'm going to be somebody who runs today. That's who I'm going to be. Like today I'm going to be a person who runs, and I ran, and I had to literally tell myself that, like, that's the kind of person that I'm going to be. And I used to do that a lot, you know, like talking about the whole recovery coach stuff. When I first got sober, I had to really use that technique a lot with, like, I'm going to be a nonviolent person. I am going to be somebody who does not steal things from Walmart. You know, I had to like tell myself the kind of person that I was going to be and kind of play a role until it stuck.
Right. How much do you think of that, like maybe addiction or diving into addiction or drug use to begin with, is related to the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, if any?
I think that's a deep question, and I think it varies. I would say it varies drastically between people. You know, I don't know. And I think maybe my story is different from a lot of people's because I told myself, I guess a lot of people do, but I told myself that I wanted to be a party person from a very young age. I told myself I am going to be like the guy on Scarface, you know, like I'd see that movie when I was a kid and I was going to be like, I'm going to do that. I told myself from a very young age that that was the kind of person I was going to be. And then I became that person. So
do you think that's in reaction to your natural introversion? And maybe you're not, but you have always seemed kind of introverted to me, even when we have conversations, you know, in the car riding around to go to people or stuff like that. It's like, I feel like your personal thoughts and things are kind of like, you're sometimes reluctant to put them out there for an amount of time. And like, do you think that wanting to be the party person is in response to that?
I will tell you that nobody who knew me before I was 25 years old would even kind of consider me to be introverted, because that is a change that occurred after having some recovery. And I think, I don't know how it happened. It wasn't really a conscious effort, but growing up and through my using and an early recovery, I was really just completely over the line outgoing, gave way too much information. I think it's gone now, but like my MySpace page from the MySpace days, I found that a few years back because the internet is forever. I was able to find it. And I mean, my MySpace page from when I was a teenager, it was like, I'm a heroin addict. I mean, just in your face. Like, I wanted you to know exactly who I was and what I did, and I didn't care. And it was, I had this like perception of almost like, if horrible things happened to me and I did horrible things, that was like a badge of honor to me. Like, like being a victim, gave me some glory, because it, you know, there's like a lot of ways we can get attention from people and get people to notice us. And being a victim and saying shocking things, that seemed like a really easy way for me to get that attention that I wanted. And I did it. And I was, I mean, thank God cell phones weren't as big like when I was growing up, when I was a teenager and when I was using, because there would be videos of me out there doing some really heinous stuff, some weird interactions with people at grocery stores or just driving down the street. I mean, it was totally different. Kind
of like a shock value. Does that come from a sense of rebelliousness, or like what? Like, if we were to sit here and say, hey, what's the common thread that you see among people that you encounter like that through your work? Like, is, you know, you said it's attention for sure. It was really in your face. I think one of the interesting things that you say that I don't encounter as much is that you're upfront about all of it, right? Like that, no attempt to hide it, no attempt to, you know, even if you feel shame about it, like no attempt to conceal any of those things. So what is that? Is that rebelliousness? Is that a lack of attention? Is it, or do you know?
I think it's a few things. I think a lot of it was immaturity. And I think a lot of it was, you know, I think a lot of things that we do are based in fear. And for me, I would have never known it at the time or acknowledged it, but I was just so fearful about life, and I was so desperate for love and attention, and for somebody to to notice me, or, you know, and it was really one of those situations where even if it was negative attention, that's better than no attention at all. So
Sure.
it was really easy for me to get negative attention, and that's what I did any way that I could.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I'm telling you, it's like talking with people now, and I'm very active in 12-step programs, and especially in my early recovery, I was extremely active, and I did a lot of speaking commitments and went to all over Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and I would share my story, and like thinking back to that, I just cringe because there was nothing humbling about it for me. I took those commitments strictly to talk about myself and to exaggerate my woes and, you know, talk about what a crappy childhood I had and all the things I had been through. And so today, my story is totally different.
Yep.
You know, my childhood was great. My parents did the best they could with what they had. Like, it just like a 180. And I don't know, it didn't happen overnight. I don't know where that mindset went and where this new mindset came from. But it's quite you know, when I run into people now who haven't seen me since I got clean and sober, I'm literally unrecognizable, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's weird.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I think I see a lot of that and experience some of that myself in terms of like that weird trying on an identity. I definitely had my, you know, attention grabbing moments. Usually it was more through things like humor, shock value type things. That's kind of the crowd I fell into in high school. And you'll say the risky thing just to be shocking, or you'll take up some stupid habit to seem eccentric, right? Like it's like this weird character that you put on, like, hey, where am I going to fit here, and how are people going to know? And like when I look back at that, it's really obvious to go. It's like, oh, I wanted some attention. Yeah. Like that's what it really came down to. Is like I wasn't that person. I wanted some attention, and I don't know when that changes in your life, and I don't know maybe if it's because you find some piece of legitimacy in your life, and then maybe you are comfortable with who you are, and you're able to look back and analyze that stuff a little bit better and a little bit more honestly because it's no longer shameful. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband talks a lot about, you know, identity and how, like, you know, we tend to, like, I'm a mom, right? So when I think about my identity, I can get really just immersed in the fact that I'm a mom, and I could take that on as my entire identity, or even as a recovery coach. I can take that on as my entire identity. Recovery, helping others, that's my life. But at some point, all of those things, being a mom, being a recovery coach, being a daughter, you know, all of those things, we have to kind of like learn how to pull them together and balance it, because our identity can't just be one of those things.
Right.
Because what if it was taken away? What if my funding stops and I stop being a recovery coach? I would disappear if being a recovery coach was my entire identity. So I don't know. I think a lot of it is maturing and just acceptance, and really just like making a decision about who we want to be. And, you know, and I think like watching ourselves set goals and accomplish them is so important. Right. You know, like the act of like seeing myself hit milestones was so important, especially as somebody with low self-esteem and just broken confidence, you know, to see myself achieve something that at one point I had just wanted so badly to achieve. That is such a big deal for our souls, you know? I feel like that's so important. And I don't think enough people get to experience that. You know?
I feel like a lot of people are not told that they're incapable of doing that or can't do that. I think some of the messages, like you said, there was some amount of being a victim that you like held up that felt good. And it's like, I think part of that is one of those identity things, right? Like part of what, like you said, your story went from like, oh, this horrible and woe is me thing to like, well, actually, like my parents did a really great job, and they tried their hardest. And I think that there is currency in having that same thing. It's an eccentric backstory, right? Yes. Like if you look at the stories that we see as a culture that we put up in movies or things like that. It's an underdog story. We love an underdog story. So sometimes it feels like it's in our best interest to paint ourselves as the underdog, right? And that way, what you do accomplish has a little bit more value, or feels like it has more value, and you're not really responsible for your failures, right? Like it kind of excuses your own failures.
Oh, and I milked that. I milked it for as long, as hard as I could, until, you know, the day that you wake up and it's so cringy to look back on that behavior.
Right.
And I just absolutely do not, I don't need that acceptance from anyone ever. I am just really, and that might change in a couple months, who knows? But I just absolutely don't need that approval from anyone, which brings us back to like the nervousness thing. I don't know why it scares me so much to be in front of people, because I really don't care what people think. But maybe I do. Maybe it's a subconscious thing. I don't know what that is.
I mean, I think on some level we all care what people think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even if, you know, you and I are accepting of who we are, like internally as people, and we go, okay, I feel like you know, I'm pretty integrated. I tried to blend all these elements, and like I have some sense of self-validation, right? Yeah. Like I'm proud of the ethics that I uphold, or the way I make decisions, whatever it is. I think part of how we determine that is feedback from society, feedback from the larger group, right? Because it's not like you manifested those values by yourself out of nowhere. It's like you've got an entire species, an entire history standing behind you saying these are the valuable, worthwhile things, and you know, and we're gonna kind of mold you into an acceptable individual. And so I think those two things hinge on each other a lot. It's, hey, how much do I accept myself is kind of contingent a little bit upon how much acceptance I see for me out in the world. Right. And I think that maybe that's why the things like the victim trap or the eccentric trap or whatever it is become appealing, right? Because it is currency somewhere, so you can kind of base that, you're getting the external feedback that says, like you talked about with the judges, I say judges, directors, whoever they were at the play, where it's like, well, maybe they just gave me a part because of pity. Right. Like maybe that's why. Right. And I think, you know, to look and see the difference in that is pretty introspective. And then to learn to set the goals, right? Like to pick, no, I am capable of doing this, and here's my measurable goal, and I'm going to do it because it's difficult, right? Yeah. Like, is that the road to recovery? I learning or teaching yourself I can accomplish difficult tasks?
That's a huge part of it, I think. I think it's massive, and I think that's why we're, you know, having a lot of trouble with people maintaining long-term recovery. You know, I think we're doing really good at getting people into detoxes and dried out, and, you know, maybe into a 30-day program where they can start building a good foundation. You know, and I don't have answers. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but just for like talking it out sake, I feel like, you know, there isn't any of that. Like and I think it's a good, I try to implement it as a recovery coach because I feel like it's my role. We need to help people create these meaningful goals and then walk them through, literally hold their hand through the process to the end. And then once they've accomplished it, you know, to have me, the same person there who's helped them set that goal, to have me there and to point out, like, look what you just did. Right. You like a year ago, you would have done anything to accomplish what you just accomplished, and you did it. Like that kind of, I don't know. I feel like that's really important. And I think that we get, you know, that self-esteem even just through, you know, having a job, you know, working, volunteering, helping others. You know, 12-step programs are based around trusting God and helping others. You know, when all else fails, that's the basis of it. And you know, there's just something like when I got clean, it was my dad told me, you need to get a job. You need to have a sense of purpose. And that's what I did. I got a job, and I will tell you, it gave me a reason to, you know, set an alarm and get up in the morning. It gave me a reason to brush my teeth, which I don't care what anybody says. When you're an addict, you're just not doing it. Like, it's not something that's a priority, you know? So you have to like relearn all of these stupid little things when you get clean. You know, so to set an alarm, have a reason to brush my teeth, have a reason to take a shower, have a reason to not just like blindly grab into a drawer and pull out a ripped pair of sweatpants, you know, but to actively look for something decent looking to put on and go to work. That was so crucial for me in early recovery. And, you know, and then obviously like the act of, you know, going to work and having normal interactions with other human beings throughout the day. People who live by a code, you know, who have morals and values, because when we're out there, like I had no, you know, like my associates were, you know, not the salt of the earth kind of people. You know, I was hanging out with people who had absolutely no morals and no values, the same as myself. So to interact every day at a job with people who, you know, they were not okay with stealing. They, you know, using drugs is not okay with them. You know, they were like, that's not normal. And at that time, I was that obnoxious person that I used to be. So I worked at Stop and Shop when I got clean. So I was in the deli and everybody knew everything about my whole life and all my business. And I mean, way more than they could have ever wanted to know about me. You know, and just like me seeing their looks, taking in their expressions. When I said something that wasn't a big deal to me, but they were like appalled by it. Right. Like seeing that, I'm like, oh my God, this is unacceptable behavior. I am unacceptable. Right. You know, because you don't know what you don't know. I didn't even realize, I mean, I knew I was like out of control, but there was certain, you know, certain behaviors and just certain things I didn't even know were wrong. Right. Because they're so obviously wrong that nobody ever said to me, that's wrong. So I just didn't know. Do you know what I mean?
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, I feel like there's certain parts of that I've experienced through police work. Like everybody knows police work, and they put it so politely, gallows humor, right? Yeah. You make light of dark situations, and that's how you get through it. But it always becomes immediately apparent how out of the ordinary that is when I'm at, say, like my in-laws, and there's a family event, and I crack a joke that would just kill in lineup, and everyone's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, I shouldn't do that. Like, this is not the time or place for this in polite society. Yes. And
desensitized.
How much of what you take on in some of those group roles do you think does translate into what you think is a broader value? Like, you know, I would go up there and I'd take for granted, like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to rip this joke, and it's amazing. It's such a good fast, right? I'm so proud of myself. And then everybody looks at me and I'm like, wait, am I conflating like my professional values with actual, like, you know, capital V values, right? Like, we see that. I shouldn't say see that. I feel like that a lot as police. Like we have a real particular code, real particular set of values. And it's funny when you look out into regular society and it's like, oh, no. Like those are just like, kind of like some of them are definitely, you know, in line with everyone else, but it's like, oh no, that's our made up weird code. That's not value. Yeah. Like
it's a culture thing. And it's the same with addiction, you know, like we talk about in 12-step meetings all the time, like, man, if a normie walked in here right now and heard us saying this, you know, like you kind of become desensitized or whatever it is that, you know, things lose their shock, you know, and I don't know, I've always, not always, recently, like the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I kind of almost like mourn for my innocence, like because I did start using so young, and I just started being nuts so young. Like, you know, I meet people in my job that, you know, that work at Reliance Health or just other agencies, and great, lovely people. And they're so people that would be shocked by some of the things that I've said or done. Right. And sometimes I think like, I'll never get to experience that. Like I almost like mourn not, like I'll never be shocked by almost anything, you know, like I don't have that innocence, and I never really did, you know, like I lost that innocence so young, just, and for whatever reason, you know, like family stuff or school stuff, whatever it was, like, I just feel like I learned too much too soon. Right. So I kind of missed out on that. And, you know, you mentioned like morals, even stuff like that. I never once even considered like what are my morals or values until, well into recovery. I mean, it never even occurred to me. I never even stopped to think about what I believed or what I thought or, what was right. I don't know. I think that those things are really important too. I think that, having a code and living by it and being, knowing your audience and being respectful of the people that you're around. I don't know, those things, it's all a part of recovery. It's all a part of maturity. I don't know.
If we reframed that and I asked you, would you rather, I'll probably word this wrong, but is it better to have lost that innocence that you mourn so early, or to never have lost it at all? Because I feel like one of the things that I find now, after this many years in policing, and like, hey, that innocence is gone, right? And it was gone from the second you decided you were going to enter the profession, like probably before that. It's one of the things that drives you in there. I tend to like people that have been through it a little bit, have made the heavy mistakes, and I feel like, not in all cases. I mean, the straight and narrow is a great thing to do, and it's a great path to walk. But I find like the redemptive aspect of having lost the innocence is I go, those are the people that I know have now decided these are my morals. They are immovable. And like, I see them really integrate that into their lives in a way that, like, I guess that they appear tested to me.
Yeah.
Right. That moral structure, that moral underpinning that you kind of move through your life with is then you mean it, right?
Right.
Like, because if you didn't mean it, you'd still maybe be doing crime type stuff or have a needle in your arm or whatever. And so is there a preference there? Would you take it back?
Yeah,
I guess
I wouldn't. I don't think I would. That being said, I don't think that I would. I think, if anything, I get almost, and I take full responsibility for everything that I've done. But as a child, there's a lot of, outside influences that can remove that innocence just kind of like layer by layer. And I think maybe the only part that bothers me is, those outside forces that I didn't have a choice, I mean, maybe that's something that bothers me. Or even, like further down the road, now I have 2 little boys, 11 and 7. They're my whole wide world.
Right.
And they, they don't know anything about my history. They know nothing about it. And, but it's a small town, like where I grew up is a small town, and that kind of stuff bothers me. It bothers me that, growing up, like maybe we're going to run into, some of their friends whose parents knew me, and, like that kind of stuff bothers me. So when I'm in those situations, it's seldom, but when I am in those situations, I really do kind of like mourn that loss. I wish that things could have been different. But I also know that like my life would just absolutely be nowhere, not even recognizable if I had done the straight and narrow thing. Right. I am 1000% who I am and with who I'm with, and just because of the things that I went through. I mean, my husband, and he's in recovery also, and we did that together, and our whole world is just built on this foundation of recovery, and it has been from day one. So I wouldn't change any of it. That's for sure. But it is weird to think about, how I'll never have that, I wouldn't want to, I feel like ignorance is bliss sounds kind of rude, but like,
no, but I think that's partially true, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. Yeah. And if you were to give advice to young people that are like maybe going down the wrong road, is there a surrogate? Like, you talked about, hey, I wanted to go challenge myself. I wanted to go face my fears kind of thing. Like, is that an adequate way to develop those values? Is like fear facing? Because to me, that's one of the things that that defines who you are, is like, hey, how are you going to encounter adversity? And can you create that adversity for you to then conquer, right? In your case, the public speaking is actually kind of one of my similar ones.
Yeah, I don't think anything beats making the conscious decision to do something that you're afraid of, to overcome the fear I don't think anything beats that. It's so,
Yeah.
you know, because I've overcome a lot of things in my life, and most of the things that I've overcome were either not willingly or, you know, not planned, but to try to overcome the fear of like the public speaking thing, you know, to kind of like, you know, like we're talking about goals, you know, I made a goal that I am going to do this, this, and this in order to, you know, overcome this fear and be able to do this, this, and this better. And then to watch myself actually do that, I think, you know, I think it helps hugely, not just to get over that fear, but like, you know, your self-esteem, you know, it's so easy to, I don't know what the numbers are, but I watch Dr. Phil a lot. I'm a big, yeah, I don't like love him or anything. I like some of his advice, but he talks about how like the difference between the amount of words we can speak a minute and the amount of words that we think per minute. And it's, you know, it's something like you talk at 100 words a minute, but you think at like 100,000 words a minute, something crazy like that. And just, I think, you know, I know my thought process in my head, it's mostly negative unless I'm consciously deciding to think positive things. You know, it's mostly bills. You know, the kids have some kind of practice that I'm going to miss or forget about, or, you know, a homework assignment or something at work. Like, it's mostly stress and negative. I don't know. I don't even know where that came from, Nick. Where'd that even come from?
Well, I mean, maybe it's some of the catalyst for what kind of, hey, I mean, really addiction is numbing, right? Or in the case of that addiction, it's a numbing sensation. I had somebody tell me once that anxious people constantly live in the future and depressed people constantly live in the past. And that popped into my head when you said that, because you're going, well, this could happen and this could happen and that could happen and this could happen. And I operate really similarly. I see the negative. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop at all times until I make myself do it the other way. And I guess for me, the antidote is constantly wondering. I wonder why. I wonder why that, as opposed to saying, well, I think this could happen. It's like, I try to go, well, no, why is this the way that it is? Right. And that's how I deal with it. But in terms of the goal setting, like you said, is it necessary, you know, if the person's watching right now that has the addiction and that seems like an insurmountable goal, right? Because really, like, that's a difficult goal to set. You're going to go, okay, I have this thing that I'm addicted to. Never again for the rest of my life seems like a really long time.
Yeah, it does. It is.
Are there smaller measurable goals that people can set, maybe even unrelated to the addiction itself, to help that along the way?
Absolutely.
What would you recommend? Like, if you picked one with your knowledge of, you know, that life, what would be the one to start with that's realistic?
I think, I don't know, I think it's a couple of different things. I think that it is absolutely crucial to, like, detox is crucial. Not just taking a day away from using, giving yourself a week to completely get whatever it is out of your system, because it's, you know, especially with heroin, you know, you have a few days away from it and you don't feel good. You are very, very sick. And, you know, at that point, even though it's leaving your system, it's still there, and your thought process is not rational. You know, the things that you're thinking in that period of time, they're not right. They're warped. Your view of life is warped. So just having some time just physically separated from whatever the substance is to get your mind clear. You can't, it's so hard to even to set any other goal while it's still in your system. It's just, you know, and that.
You say your perception's that warped, like.
It is.
Is there a good example? Like, how, you know, you're 2 days off of heroin, maybe for the first time, or maybe for the fifth time, like, what is going on in somebody's head that's going through that at the time?
The whole process is so weird. And I don't even know, I would like to go back at some point and look at my records to see how many detoxes I ended up in, but I went to a lot of treatment centers, but I went to an insane amount of detoxes. I was in detox all the time, and it was just this pattern, and I see it with other people too. It was this pattern of, I'm using, there's consequences, I'm in trouble, I'm cold, I'm hungry, whatever it is, and I need to stop doing this drug. So I'd go to detox, you know, give them my insurance card and filling out all the paperwork, doing the intake. They're gonna take me in, and almost within a few hours, like they're putting the Johnny on me and bagging up my clothes, and I'm like, I overreacted here. I shouldn't have come here.
Right.
I'm making a mistake, because it's that quick that your brain, it feels like you've changed your mind.
Yeah.
Like the desire, and that's why, like, I talk about the window of opportunity, right, for getting clean, because it's so, you don't know how long that window is going to be open for, and you don't have control over that window. But
Right.
when that desire to get clean hits, and it could hit any time, while you're using, while you're not using, while you're, in a beautiful hotel, while you're sleeping under a bridge, you don't know when it's going to happen. But when it happens, it's so intense, and the willingness to get better and to live a different lifestyle is so overwhelming. You do whatever you got to do. So, and that's when you go into the detox, and then it could shut within minutes. Like, it's unbelievable.
Right.
And that's when you think, I overreacted, I got to get out of here. But, my experience
Yeah.
with getting into detox, once you're in there, the pain, the emotional pain, and the heaviness of having to, sit on this cot or bed or whatever it is with none of your belongings, with nobody, just having to sit there and think about what led you to this moment. It's so overwhelming and unbearable, and it's so incredibly painful. And that's just what happens. Like, whether you want it to or not, I would go and I'd sit on these detox beds, and it would just be like, who did I hurt? Let's sit here, Now
Right.
it's going to be 5 days of me sitting here thinking about all of the people who are praying for me right now, crying for me, all
Right.
the people I stole from. It's so incredibly painful that it's just easier to leave, Like, it really is just easier to leave the detox, or to finish up the detox, and I'm all set with a program, thanks, I'm going to do it on my own.
Right.
And
If you use it, goes away.
for a minute, sometimes
Right.
literally just for a minute.
Right.
When I would use, it's not that it would go away, but you just don't care. It's like, I've
Sure.
had pain issues, like legitimate pain issues in my life.
Right.
And I would take pain medication, and I would realize, like, the pain is still there, but I just don't
just don't
care.
care about it. Right.
Yeah, like, just whatever, it's
Right.
still there, but it's just whatever. And it's just really, and it's hard to put it into words. I mean, the damage that you do as, that we do as addicts is so, it's just like cruel, like the things I would do to my parents, just them not knowing where I was for months at a time.
Sure.
To do that to a parent, it's so wrong, it's so awful. And when you get clean and you go through detox, I mean, aside from the physical stuff, which is horrendous, I mean, you feel physically terrible. To have those thoughts swimming in your head, it's unbearable. It's unbearable.
Do you think that's worse than the physical pain of withdrawal?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Because it's you can distract yourself with the coloring books that they have in the detox, or
Right.
watching TV or whatever, but it's just constantly there. You're constantly, because you're sitting in this place as a result of all of these horrible things that you've done, and that's just all you think about while you're there. And really, like, so when I finally got clean, I didn't go to detox. I didn't go to a program. Because I had just done them. And I hear people say that a lot now. Like, I'll try to help get somebody into detox, and I've done it 1,000 times. And the detox part, I think it's kind of crucial for everybody. You just got to get that stuff out of your system. The program, if you've done it 1,000 times, I get it. But sometimes you have to just separate yourself from the substance. And sometimes going into a treatment center is the only way to do that. And I was just really fortunate. I had a friend who owned a sober house, and he let me stay there and detox. And that's what I did. And I was done. And I had been done 100 other times before that. Like every time, almost every time, sometimes I went to please people, but almost every time I went to detox, I was broken, destroyed, and done. I didn't ever want to do it again. I was so sick of hurting myself and hurting the people around me.
Right.
And I meant it. I meant it so much with all of my heart. And then I would use again. Like, you could have put me on a lie detector test. Will you ever use again in your life? And I would have said nope. And I had to pass with flying colors every time. And that is how, you know, I know that this is like, it's genetics, it's biological. There is something internally that is so beyond my control, because there's no way I would make the choice to pick up again, knowing, after looking at my pattern, there is no way I would consciously choose to do that.
Right.
It was so beyond my control, I swear. And it's not it isn't an excuse, because I think that's what it is. When it's in your system, it's got you, you know, especially fentanyl, heroin. When it is in your body, it has you. And that's why detox or whatever, laying in your bed for a week, get it out of your system. Because then there's no more excuses. Then you're making a choice.
Right. Yeah.
You know? It's brutal. It's so brutal.
I feel like I see a tiny microcosm of that in a lot of people, and occasionally in myself. You said, you know, I've got to sit there for 5 days, just me and everything I've ever done wrong.
Shame.
And I feel like, you know, while that, you know, that example that you give is of detox and particularly heroin and the decisions that came along with that, I feel like a lot of people are going to relate to that, because, like, try sitting with yourself for 25 minutes in dead silence, right? Like, that's a skill. Yep. And I think we have the phone now to help with that. Like, that's a real addiction that you see out and about, and I've caught myself doing it too. It's like, I'm sitting here, oh, well, I'll pull out my phone and find myself scrolling, and it's like, I didn't even want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Yes.
And I do think some of that's just escaping. It's just escapism. It's escaping from your own brain and all your insufficiencies, right? We're all imperfect. We've all done stupid things in our lives. And, like, even the small ones that everybody else probably forgot about, you sit around beating yourself up about them anyway, right? Of course. And, you know, maybe you're not living the story that you thought you'd be living or whatever it is. And you'd go, okay, well, I don't care about it if I, you know, look at this screen, right? If I scroll this thing and keep myself busy, I don't care about it. Or if I, you know, if I eat this junk food, you get some respite, you get some relief from it, and then
if I'm at this casino, if I'm shopping at this mall, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, you busy your brain with some things that are unhealthy, or, you know, in better cases, like, people wind up switching addictions, right? You become addicted to working out, or you become addicted to, you know, the other thing that's maybe better for you, but that's not the solution to the problem yet.
Right.
And you know, you've mentioned the 12 steps quite a few times. Like, can you outline some of what that is? Like, I'm semi-familiar, but for people that aren't, like, it seems more than just an addiction beating pattern, right? And it's an accepted one prescribed by courts at this point. But, like, that seems almost like a serious a pattern of living in some regard. So
it is. It's a complete lifestyle. And there's over like 250 12-step programs in the world, you know, AA and NA being two of them, right? The most well-known, but they have 12-step programs for literally any problem you can imagine. You know, and it's really 12-step, and I am by no means a spokesperson for AA or NA or any other 12-step program. My experience has been that as a whole, it can be extremely rewarding. I've seen it work for a lot of people. I've seen it not work for people. But because it's an outline for life, it helps you build some kind of structure, right? So the first thing you get when you go to a 12-step program is community. You know, there's like-minded people there who have been where you have been, who have felt what you're feeling, and they kind of just validate where you're at, you know? And having that is super important in especially early recovery too. Having somebody that's telling you it's, you know, it's pretty normal that you want to die right now, you know.
Right.
It's, you know, it's the way you're feeling is normal, and especially having people that will tell you the right things and the wrong things to do in that moment. Because when you get clean, when you actually get clean and you're separated from drugs and alcohol or whatever it is, and you have a little bit of time, you almost feel this like urgency to fix everything that you've destroyed. And that can be really dangerous. And, you know, especially armed with enough information about 12-step programs. Like, most people know that you confess your wrongs and you make amends, right? That most people know that about 12-step programs. Having that information but not having all of that information is really dangerous. And I'll give you a perfect example. So I, you know, the amends process is a huge part of any 12-step program. And, you know, the thing is that you make amends whether you're making amends when it's necessary, unless it would hurt you or somebody else, right? Injure you or somebody else. So I guess in my brain, when I got clean, I just kind of disregarded that part because I just wanted to make amends. And I was very, very well-intentioned, and I just wanted to fix everything quickly so that I could feel better. And all I really cared about was me needing to feel better because I felt awful. And I had dated this guy who was just wonderful. I was using. He was not an addict at all. He was just so full of love and so kind and just a really good guy. And I put him through the ringer with my using. And I started seeing somebody else while I was using and living with him. So when I got clean, I held so much guilt about that whole situation. And I also knew that I was going to run into him at some point because we lived in the same town, and I just knew it was going to be uncomfortable. And I wanted to not feel that uncomfortableness. I wanted to feel better. So I just wrote a whole confession, everything that I did to him. You know, it was like just a confession letter, and I'm so sorry. And if you need to know anything else or want to talk anymore, please call me and I'll answer any questions you have. And I sent him this letter, and his response was, don't ever contact me ever again. That was way too much information. And what had happened was, like, now I need to make an amends for making that amends, right? Because I injured him. I gave him way too much information, things that he did not need to know, that harmed him to learn,
right?
You know? And that happens a lot. And, you know, there's a lot of little, like, mess ups like that when you're trying to get clean in a 12-step program, because you're well-intentioned, you think you know what's best, but having that community of like-minded people to kind of rein you in. If I had been talking to someone or had a sponsor or a good network at that point, they would have said, you need to leave that alone because you're not even near that step yet, you know?
Right.
It's really important to have that community to help you through the process of making this into a lifestyle, because it's really complicated. Like, and it's so different from the lifestyle we live when we're using. It's so much more structured. And just having the community around you too, they help you with little things that aren't part of the step work, like trying to build little routines, like making your bed every day. Like, my sponsor told me when I was like a year clean that you were supposed to change your sheets on your bed. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I had no idea that bed sheets were something that, like, needed to be changed pretty regularly and washed.
Right.
And getting clean early and going, you know, being part of a 12-step program, I mean, you're growing up, you know? Like, I grew up in recovery. I learned how to properly wash dishes in recovery. I learned how to vacuum in recovery. I learned how to, you know, got my first frying pan and learned how to, like, make an egg, you know? There's things that you don't know how to do. And I think that people that are any age, I mean, I've seen 50, 60-year-olds that come into the 12-step programs and are trying to put their life together, and they have to relearn all these things because it's doing them sober is just different.
Do you think the older that people get, is it more difficult to humble yourself to the level of, I need to learn these basic things at an older age? Do people have a more trying time? Because I think about the question that I might not ask, that I'm supposed to ask to people because I don't know the answer, but it's shameful that I don't know the answer at this point.
Right.
Like, embarrassed to even ask the question. So, like, you know, it sounds like kind of a subordinated position to be in, especially to a sponsor that's maybe younger than you or something like that. Like you said, you grew up doing it, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I don't know. I think the older women, and I obviously I have a lot more experience with women because that's who I basically communicate with and work with. The older women are just, when you've been doing it your whole life, you've lost so much.
Yeah.
I see a lot of older alcoholics. I don't see a lot of older heroin addicts. It's
Right.
just, they're just not around because we don't live or, I don't know what it is, but,
do you think heroin's one that people outgrow? I shouldn't say outgrow. They age out, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I know what you mean.
even if you look at famous artists that die young, that they always say by 27, if they wind up
27,
past that, a lot of times they'll mature out of it, age out of, the wild lifestyle at the very least. It's not that they're left in a particularly great place, but they
Right.
we see it in crime too. Like, people age out of doing violent crime, a lot of them at
Right.
some point. It's like, oh, you're past that, and it's, handicapped your life in a bunch of ways, and other things are going to happen, but it's you kind of age out of the extreme behavior out of it. Or do you think it's, and maybe I'm throwing too much here for it, like, is it a generational issue? Because I've often wondered, and I think we've talked about, like, why does our generation do heroin, but the generation before us did coke? Why? Availability? Is it a sense of, hey, coke is I want more of this, heroin is I want less of this? Like, and I know we're running a little short on time. I got the
Are we?
5 minutes. We are actually, yeah.
Really? It's gone by that quick?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, and I'm really enjoying this. I wish we didn't. We
I
weren't
know.
running on time because I feel like we could do this a long time.
I know, but I don't know. I think I think it's dangerous to think that people could grow out of it. I mean, I'm sure that it happens, but I think now, like with opiates and stuff, there's people that do heroin and then they get onto pain medications and other opiates because it's just more acceptable and
Sure.
maybe they could function on it, I see that a lot. I don't know. And as far as, my personal experience between, cocaine and heroin, it was definitely availability.
Okay.
And just like overall peer pressure. Like it just seemed, because I would have always preferred uppers, always.
Yeah.
But I didn't often do them because of the people that I was with. Everyone, wanted heroin, and that's
Right.
kind of the way that I went.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but you really, thankfully, I think heroin destroys, especially nowadays, it's just destroying people so fast that, we see a lot of young people
Yeah.
because they're
Way too many.
broken quickly. It broke me. I didn't use heroin for long, maybe like 3 years. I did opiates before that, but, actually intravenously using heroin, it was only like 2.5, 3 years. And
Right.
I was destroyed the whole time. I was done. It ruined everything so quickly.
Right. And you made it out, which is the amazing part. And that's really why we wanted to have you on, because you are, and I can't help but notice every time that I talk to you, you're so solicitous and so open and honest about things. And obviously that's part of your ethic, and why we wanted to have you on. What do you think? So part of what our show is that we want people to have something immediately implementable and touchable within their community regarding what is perceived as a large problem. So, what can people do, whether they know an addict or don't know an addict or are an addict here in Norwich? Like, are you still giving the Narcan trainings
Yes.
out? Can people go get them?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know if there's a way that you can put our information or
Yeah.
contact information. That is one thing that we have definitely done right. We have saturated this area with Narcan. And, despite the overdose death rate, the numbers that we're seeing those who are being saved because of Narcan are on the rise. And that's because we give everybody Narcan. And if you need any, I can certainly give it to anybody out there who is watching. They can contact me. I can facilitate a training. My coworker, her name's Autumn. She's the other recovery coach. She can come out with me. She can also facilitate. I think that's the number one thing is getting Narcan and knowing the Good Samaritan law, you know?
Right.
I think, you know, we've talked about how like seconds count when somebody overdoses.
Yeah.
You know, to take 10 seconds to flush your drugs down the toilet or to hide paraphernalia, it is not necessary, right? I mean,
Right. No, we're not showing up to arrest you. We're showing up to
Save the
treat
life.
somebody to save the life. And, you know, minor possession charge, something like that you were using with them. Like that's now codified into law. We can't just arrest you for a minor possession charge when we get there. Not that we have in Norwich for the longest time, but we do encounter it. Somebody gets dragged out into the hallway and they call and they say, oh, well, we just found this person. It's like, no, just call us.
Yeah.
We'll be there. The life is more important.
Absolutely. I think getting that information out to people is so important because people don't know that.
Right.
Like I've heard it so much over the last couple of years that it seems crazy to me any other way. But when I tell people about the Good Samaritan law and don't hide your drug, they're like, really? They won't arrest me? And they don't trust me when I tell them that either. I'm like, I'm telling you, and you can call Rankin and he'll tell you.
Well, and then you made us up the business cards or
Yes.
Erin made some too.
Yes.
But yeah, it has the Good Samaritan law on it.
Which
So
is
people
great.
are aware of, or people that have already overdosed are aware of that, but
Yeah.
other people may not be.
Yeah.
Narcan, I mean, I think some of the pushback that we saw from it in the initial was like, well, they're just going to go do it again. Well, they're just going to go do it again. How many times, how many rock bottoms does somebody typically hit before they go, hey, like, and then they do it? Because that seems to be the experience that I hear again and again is like, I screwed up so many times, but eventually I made it.
Yeah. And that's the case. And I don't think people who have the mindset of like, I'm not going to Narcan somebody or why bother, I don't know that we're going to change their minds. I don't. But I mean, I can tell you, like, I'm a mom. I have 2 beautiful little boys. I have an amazing husband. We just bought a beautiful home. We are both hardworking, productive members of society. We give back.
Right.
You know, I'm the person that like you wouldn't have Narcaned or saved, you know?
Right.
And you know, now we're at where we're at. So I think if minds are going to be changed, maybe that will do it. Just kind of, you know, recovery coaches being out there showing, you know, look at, I'm a contributing member of society. I've righted my wrongs. I'm going to live the rest of my life trying to be better and do better and make up for anything that I did in my past. But I don't think that I can't even get myself into the mindset of thinking a life isn't worth saving when it comes to opiates.
Including one's own life, I would imagine.
They're just, and that's one thing, just really quick, like doing the overdose follow-ups.
Yeah.
We're reaching people that we normally wouldn't reach, right? We're reaching people that, you know, that maybe do work or that you know, they own their home or, this affects everybody. So I don't think you can put a limit on the amount of times we can save somebody, you know, because at some point they're going to get it. They're going to get it or they're going to pass away.
Right.
You know, that's just how it goes.
I think it is incumbent upon us all to continue trying to save the life, save the life, save the life. I mean, and I guess we'll kind of end on some of that. But like if you're the example, and however many times you said you went into detox or it didn't stick or whatever, like now I know personally that our city is a better place because you're in it. Our community is a safer place because you're in it. It's enriched my personal life because you're involved in it. So like that's the next person. That's the next person that maybe one of us gets to save or that makes it. And I hope that's the case. And
Absolutely.
thanks for coming in.
Thank
And
you for
you don't look nervous anymore.
I know, I'm
and
totally
I don't feel nervous
relaxed now.
anymore. That was Community Off the Cuff. Have a good one.